Sayaka-chan! I turned around when I heard my first name, which didn't happen often at school. It was an upper-class man from the choir club. I always called her Yuzuki-senpai, so I didn't actually know her first name. Mine, on the other hand, rolled off her tongue quite naturally. On top of that, she had even added a chan to the end of it. I was a little bit miffed by this. It didn't sound right to my ears. What is it? Oh, nothing. I saw you, so I called your name. That's all. Her tidy hair, not quite long enough to reach her shoulders, fluttered faintly. There was no ulterior motive behind her bright smile. It seemed she really had just called out to me for the sake of it. Something about that reminded me of swimming lessons. How was I supposed to respond in times like this? Saying, "Oh, I see," would seem too curt and unfriendly. Maybe it would be best for me to just smile ambiguously, as if nothing had happened. When I gave that a try, her eyes went wide for a moment, but she immediately started to smile again. "You're headed to the club room, right?" "Yeah." She came to stand by my side, presumably indicating she would go with me. I don't think you could say that Yuzuki-senpai and I were close, nor that she ever particularly looked out for me. She was in the grade above me, and we'd been in the same club ever since I joined in April of my first year, but that was all. Even when I went out with friends, it was always with students in the same grade as me, so I'd never once seen her outside of school. Still, there was something about her that felt different from the other upperclassmen, as if there was something separating her from them. "So have you heard?" "About what?" The light coming into the corridor from the window that day was serene and pleasant. You'd never guessed that it was June from the lack of humidity. My hands and arms felt light as they moved. "People have been saying you're going to be the next president, Sayaka-chan." I take that back. When she said that so casually, my entire body grew heavy. The pit on my stomach sank, as if the rest of my body might leave it behind as I tried to move forward. "Why me?" I acted doubtful. But the truth was that I'd been getting the feeling that this might happen for a while now. "Well, you're so on top of things, for one." "I don't know about that." I didn't feel like I'd been on top of things at all when it came to choir activities. The upperclassmen in choir already had things well in hand, so it wasn't as though I had no choice but to take the lead. But even that would change after this summer. Yuzuki-senpai, on the other hand, was dreamy, mostly in the way she spoke and acted. If a strong wind came by, I could picture her unraveling like a ball of cotton. There were a lot of people like that around here. The overall mood of the school was slightly different from what I had imagined when I first enrolled. "I'm counting on you too, Sayaka-chan." When she told me that with a friendly smile, I didn't sense any ill will. I nearly let it win me over, but there was something that gave me pause. "But I'm an underclassman." As my upperclassman, she ought to be the one I could count on. Her eyes gently wandered away. But that only means I was born a year earlier than you. What's important is how that year was spent." She nodded to herself, looking satisfied. I felt like we weren't quite seeing eye to eye on this conversation. And yet, she was casually calling me Sayaka-chan. Perhaps because this place had a reputation as a rich girls' school. It wasn't unusual for upperclassmen to call underclassmen by their first names, and to add a chan to the end. That never felt right to me, so I called everyone alike by their last name with a son. I was worried at first that it would alienate them, but it didn't seem to be causing any problems so far. I didn't have anyone I was on a first name basis with, other than my family. Maybe I'd meet someone like that someday, but it didn't seem like it would happen anytime soon. This combined junior high and high school was girls only, for one thing. My eyes met with my own faint reflection in the window. When I looked down, I felt like my gaze met with that of my elementary school self too. Time had passed, and I was a proper 13-year-old now, a junior high student. I commuted 3 stations from my house to Tomosumi Girls Academy, and I even wore a school uniform. There was always a cool, collected look on my face when I walked through the hall, as though I were one of the adults. Going to school by train was a lot more trouble than I thought it would be. I had shunned the local schools and chosen one far away because of my family's recommendation. In a way, though, it felt like a godsend. I had been somewhat reluctant to see that girl again in junior high. I used junior high as an opportunity to quit most of my many extracurricular activities. The only ones I kept were the Ikebana lessons, because my grandparents wanted me to continue. I told my parents that I had wanted to quit the rest in order to spend my time studying for school, and they accepted it. It was the truth, but I was also reaching the limit of how long I could keep ahead of everyone else in so many different fields. I had been gauging my abilities, based solely on whether I was winning or losing against others, but now I knew that I couldn't get ahead just by mindlessly pushing forward. I wasn't sure whether that meant my outlook had expanded, or if I had simply given up because I couldn't see what was ahead of me anymore. I wonder if my elementary school self would be satisfied with who I am now. We arrived at the music room that served as a choir club room. I could hear loud sounds from within, and when I opened the door, I found that they were in the middle of moving the desks aside. One of the underclassmen greeted me as she worked, so I gave her a simple greeting in return. "See, Sayaka-san, everyone really does count on you," Senpai said. All I did was say hello. Still, I laughed a little at Senpai's joke. I chose the choir club because it was low commitment. I didn't need an instrument, and I could do it alone. Besides, though I knew how to play the piano, I didn't have much experience with singing. Even if I was no longer putting on a bold front like I had in elementary school, it didn't hurt to gain some new skills. I was slightly late, so they had already almost finished preparing everything for the day. "I'm only going to be able to see you here for a little bit longer," Senpai said, as she looked at the empty space where the desk had been. She turned to look at me. "Senpai?" I was at loss. She looked a bit awkward too, despite being the one who said it in the first place, as she scrunched up her eyes and smiled. "Let's give it everything we got." "Right." Her voice sounded a little weak to me, as did my own. She might have wanted to say something else, but I had no way of telling at the time. Just like in math, there are some things that just can't be solved until you learn the right formula. There were about 20 people in the choir, about half of whom were third years. Only 3 were first years. The choir would probably have trouble surviving in 2 years, I thought. According to our advisor, the choir club was in a perpetual cycle of dying out and being revived. There was a chance it might disappear again by the time I graduated. Still, choir was pretty refreshing. It demanded something different compared to my lessons from elementary school. which were always about simply making myself better than the rest. In choir, I had to be aware of whether I was in harmony with those around me. I wasn't planning to apply myself too intensely to choir activities, so I was careful not to draw too much attention to myself. Under the club advisor's supervision, we all sang the parts we were given for our daily exercise. During that time, I looked around at the faces of the club members, checking in on my classmates, and the underclassman in particular. Partway through, my eyes met with Yusuke-senpai, who smiled at me. Feeling a bit awkward, I nodded to her in response. President, Thinking of the approaching responsibility, I heaved a little sigh.